In the early 1990s, nestled in the sleepy town of Willowbrook, there existed an old, abandoned mansion called Hawthorne Manor. It was said that in the late 1800s, a wealthy but eccentric family, the Hawthornes, built the house on cursed land, leading to strange disappearances and tragedies over the years. The townspeople shunned the place, and it soon became the stuff of local legends, especially among the youth, who dared each other to spend a night there. By 1993, a group of high school friends, Mark, Sarah, Chris, Jenny, and Alex, decided to form a secret club called the Midnight Club, where they would gather once a month at midnight to tell each other the scariest stories they could find. But on Halloween night of that year, they wanted to go further. They wanted to uncover the truth behind the most chilling story of all, the dark history of Hawthorne Manor. Legend had it that the Hawthorne family disappeared without a trace one cold, stormy night in 1895. Their servants reported hearing eerie whispers, seeing dark figures moving in the shadows, and experiencing unnerving cold spots around the house in the days leading up to their disappearance. The family's youngest daughter, Emily, was said to have been acting strangely, talking to things no one could see, and writing cryptic messages on the walls in her own blood. Some believe Emily summoned something dark, something that claimed the entire family as its own. The house was abandoned, left untouched for almost a century. No one who spent a night there ever came back the same, or at all. On Halloween night, the Midnight Club decided they were brave enough to unravel the truth. They arrived at Hawthorne Manor at midnight with flashlights and a Ouija board. The air was thick with mist, and the trees surrounding the mansion swayed unnaturally, as if alive. Inside the house, the floorboards creaked, and the walls seemed to whisper in a language none of them could understand. Mark, the boldest of the group, suggested they use the Ouija board in the parlor room, where Emily was last seen. Reluctantly, the others agreed. As they began the séance, strange things started to happen. The temperature dropped suddenly, their candles flickered, and a faint scratching sound echoed from the walls. The Ouija board's planchette began to move on its own, slowly spelling out AMILY. Suddenly, the lights from their flashlights flickered and went out. They were plunged into darkness, but something worse was coming. The whispers grew louder, now almost a chant, and from the corner of the room a dark figure emerged, barely visible in the shadows. It was tall and thin, with long fingers that scratched against the floor as it crawled toward them. In a panic, the group tried to leave, but the door slammed shut on its own, trapping them inside. Jenny screamed as something cold wrapped around her ankle and dragged her across the floor. Sarah ran to help her, but it was too late. Jenny disappeared into the shadows. The remaining four huddled together, desperately trying to stay calm. But it wasn't over. In the flickering light, they saw more figures emerging from the walls, twisted, shadowy versions of the Hawthorne family. Their faces were pale, eyes hollow, mouths twisted into screams that could never escape. Mark shouted at the spirits, demanding to know what they wanted. The Ouija board moved again, spelling out, "Stay, forever." One by one, the friends were taken by the spirits. Alex tried to break the windows, but they wouldn't budge. Sarah ran to the door, but an unseen force pulled her back. In the final moments, Mark was left alone, the last member of the Midnight Club, staring into the empty eyes of Emily Hawthorne, who whispered the last thing he would ever hear. "You should have never come." The next morning, when the sun rose, The townspeople found Hawthorne Manor exactly as it had always been. Empty, silent. There was no sign of the Midnight Club, but if you listened closely, you could hear faint whispers in the wind, the echo of a warning that would never leave the house. To this day, no one dares enter Hawthorne Manor after midnight. The Midnight Club became a ghost story of its own, a warning to anyone foolish enough to seek out the dark secrets of the past. Aftermath of the Midnight Club. Willowbrook's townspeople had always known Hawthorne Manor was dangerous, but after the disappearance of the Midnight Club, the story became a cautionary tale told to every child in the area. Parents warned their kids not to go near the house, and as time passed, the legend grew darker. Rumors spread that on every Halloween night, the spirits of the Midnight Club returned to the mansion, still trapped and searching for a way out. A year after the Midnight Club vanished, strange occurrences began to haunt the town. People started seeing shadowy figures in their homes at night. Whispers of their names filled the air just after midnight, and unexplained cold spots appeared, even during the hottest days of summer. One night, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who lived near Hawthorne Manor, reported seeing a figure standing at the edge of her property. It was Jenny, the girl from the Midnight Club, still wearing the clothes she had disappeared in. Mrs. Thompson called out to her, but Jenny's face was blank, her eyes hollow. She vanished into the mist before Mrs. Thompson could get closer. It wasn't just Mrs. Thompson. Other neighbors saw them too, Mark and Alex, Sarah, all wandering the town at night. Their faces pale, their movements slow and eerie. It was as if they were trying to come home, but couldn't quite find their way. 25 years later, in 2018, a group of paranormal investigators caught wind of the Midnight Club's story. They called themselves Ghost Seekers, a popular YouTube channel that had millions of followers, always on the lookout for haunted locations. The Midnight Club legend was too good to resist. The team, led by charismatic host Jake and his tech-savvy co-host Emily, ironically sharing the name of the infamous Hawthorne child, traveled to Willowbrook. Their goal, to capture footage of the supposed ghosts and uncover what really happened that Halloween night in 1993. They set up their equipment: cameras, voice recorders, thermal detectors, and even a modified version of the Ouija board. They planned to live stream the entire investigation to their audience, who would be watching from the comfort of their homes. But the townspeople, especially the older residents, warned them not to go in. They knew what happened to those who ventured into Hawthorne Manor after dark. Jake, of course, brushed it off as superstitious nonsense. Emily, though more cautious, was intrigued by the challenge. She felt like there was something deeper in the story, something that the world needed to know. On October 31st, 2018, the Ghost Seekers entered Hawthorne Manor at 11:30 p.m. The town was unusually silent that night, as if even the wind refused to stir. As they walked up to the house, they noticed something strange. There were no sounds of nature, no animals, no rustling leaves. It was as if they had entered a bubble of unnatural quiet. Once inside, they split up to explore the various rooms, narrating their experiences to their live stream audience. The house looked much the same as it had in 1993. Dusty, decaying, but untouched. Mark's jacket was still on the floor of the parlor room. The Ouija board sat where it had been left, and eerie messages, perhaps written by Emily Hawthorne, still covered the walls in dried, reddish-brown ink. They began hearing the faintest whispers, echoing through the corridors. Emily checked the thermal camera, noticing sudden cold spots where none should exist. Jake, ever the skeptic, joked with the live stream viewers, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Then the door slammed shut, just as it had 25 years before. The house seemed to come alive, the shadows growing darker and shifting unnaturally. The lights on their cameras flickered as the whispers intensified. In the parlor room, Emily set up the Ouija board again, with Jake by her side. They asked simple questions at first, but then Emily asked, "Are you the Midnight Club?" The planchette moved quickly. Yes. Emily and Jake froze, the viewers online watching in real time as the planchette continued spelling. Trapped. Suddenly, their equipment went haywire. Cameras began to malfunction, and their live feed became static. Viewers reported hearing the strange voices coming through the speakers, voices that didn't belong to the ghost seekers. Then the spirits appeared, first faintly, then more clearly. The Midnight Club, Mark, Sarah, Chris, Jenny, and Alex, stood in the room with them, their faces gaunt, eyes hollow, and mouths frozen in silent screams. They didn't speak, but their presence was suffocating. Through the static of the cameras, the audience caught glimpses of the spirits, flashing in and out like bad television reception. The ghost seekers panicked, trying to leave, but just like the Midnight Club before them, they were trapped. As the situation became more desperate, Emily saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was Emily Hawthorne, her long dark hair falling over her pale face, eyes wide with madness. She walked slowly toward them, her feet barely touching the ground. The Midnight Club spirits moved closer too, circling the ghost seekers. Jake, now truly terrified, screamed into the camera for help, but it was too late. Emily Hawthorne whispered in Emily's ear, "You shouldn't have come." The live stream cut out. For days, there was no sign of the ghost seekers. Their fans, worried and confused, flooded social media with questions, but no one could explain what had happened during the final moments of the live stream. A search party eventually found their equipment inside the house, but the team was never seen again. However, in the months following the investigation, some strange reports started coming in. People began seeing the ghost seekers, Jake, Emily, and the others, wandering the streets of Willowbrook late at night, just like the Midnight Club before them. They seemed lost, their faces blank, their eyes empty. No one ever saw them again during the day. The legend of Hawthorne Manor continued to grow. Now it wasn't just the Midnight Club that haunted its halls. The ghost seekers had become part of the story, a new warning to those who dared to seek out the truth. Some say if you visit Hawthorne Manor on Halloween night, you can still hear their whispers, begging for release. But no one who has entered the house after midnight has ever come back. As the years passed, Hawthorne Manor became a place of legend, feared by locals but still tempting thrill seekers. It was no longer just a haunted house. It had swallowed both the Midnight Club and the ghost seekers, trapping their souls forever in its eerie grasp. People from all over whispered about the manor's deadly allure, yet few dared to go near it. By 2024, the story of Hawthorne Manor had spread online, spawning documentaries, paranormal investigations, and conspiracy theories. But none of the investigations over the years had led to any breakthroughs. Every person who entered the manor either disappeared or came out mentally shattered, unable to speak of what they had experienced. One day, a determined paranormal expert named Dr. Claire Edwards, a psychologist who specialized in hauntings and ghost phenomena, decided that she would be the one to break the curse. Unlike the ghost seekers, Claire wasn't in it for fame or internet views. She genuinely believed she could help free the trapped souls of the Midnight Club and the Ghost Seekers. Claire had spent years studying the lore of Hawthorne Manor, interviewing survivors and diving deep into the history of the Hawthorne family. She believed there was a missing piece to the puzzle that no one had uncovered yet, a way to break the cycle of hauntings and free the trapped spirits. Her research pointed to one thing. Emily Hawthorne, the cursed child, had been the key all along. According to Claire's findings, Emily Hawthorne hadn't just been possessed or haunted by a malevolent spirit. She had intentionally opened a gateway to something far worse, something ancient and dark. Emily had been obsessed with contacting the other side after losing her younger brother to illness. Her grief twisted her mind, and she turned to forbidden rituals to bring him back. Instead, she had let something terrible into the house, an evil presence that fed on souls and trapped them in an endless loop of torment. To break the curse, Claire believed that she needed to complete the ritual Emily had begun over a century ago, but in reverse. She needed to return the spirits to their proper place, close the gateway, and finally put Emily Hawthorne's spirit to rest. Claire knew the risks, but she was prepared. Armed with ancient texts, protective charms, and a deep understanding of the spiritual world, she arrived at Hawthorne Manor on Halloween night, just as the others had before her. As Claire stepped into the manor, she felt the oppressive atmosphere immediately. The house was dark, the air thick with the scent of decay. She made her way through the dusty halls, her flashlight flickering, knowing that time was running short. Midnight was fast approaching, and with it, the spirits would become more active. In the parlor room, she set up her candles and chalked a circle on the floor, marking the boundaries of the ritual. As she began chanting the reversal spell, she felt a cold wind sweep through the room. The shadows lengthened, and the faint whispers of the trapped spirits echoed around her. Suddenly, Emily Hawthorne appeared, no longer just a faint figure in the shadows, but fully manifested. Her face was pale and twisted with anger, her eyes filled with a deep, unrelenting sorrow. "You can't free them," Emily hissed, her voice distorted. "They belong to me now." Claire stood her ground. "They don't belong here, Emily. You trapped them, but it's time to let them go. You need to let go." Emily's form flickered, and behind her the spirits of the Midnight Club and the Ghost Seekers appeared. Their hollow eyes seemed to plead with Claire, but something held them back, like invisible chains tethering them to the house. As Claire continued the ritual, Emily screamed, her form twisting and contorting, as if something dark and sinister inside her was trying to escape. The shadows in the room grew thicker, and Claire felt the weight of the house bearing down on her, as if the entire structure was trying to swallow her whole. Suddenly, the spirit of Emily Hawthorne lunged at Claire, knocking her to the ground. Claire's protective circle wavered, and she felt the cold, bony grip of Emily's fingers around her throat. Emily's face twisted into something monstrous, no longer just the spirit of a tormented child, but a vessel for the ancient evil she had summoned all those years ago. Claire gasped for breath, her vision blurring, but she managed to pull a small mirror from her bag, a mirror said to trap evil spirits when used in rituals. She held it up to Emily's face, and as the spirit saw her reflection, she let out an inhuman scream. The room exploded with a gust of freezing wind. The spirits of the Midnight Club and the Ghost Seekers flickered like dying flames, and the house itself groaned as if in pain. Claire shouted the final words of the ritual, pushing Emily back into the shadows. There was a blinding flash of light, and then a deafening silence. When Claire awoke, she found herself lying in the middle of the parlor. The candles were burned down, and the air was still. The house, once so full of oppressive energy, felt quiet. For the first time in over a century, the heavy, haunted atmosphere was gone. The spirits of the Midnight Club and the ghost seekers were no longer there. Claire knew she had succeeded. The souls had been freed. The curse of Hawthorne Manor had been broken. As she walked out of the house, she glanced back one last time at the now silent, decaying structure. For the first time in decades, it looked like an ordinary abandoned building. The dark presence that had once lived there was gone. But as Claire walked away, a small distant whisper brushed against her ear, sending a chill down her spine. "Thank you," the voice said, faint and barely audible. It was Emily Hawthorne. Claire smiled faintly, knowing that despite everything, Emily's soul had finally found peace. The story of Hawthorne Manor became one for the history books. The townspeople slowly stopped fearing the place, though no one moved in. It remained abandoned, but now it was no longer a place of horror, just an old house, weathered by time and freed from the dark spirits that once haunted its halls. But some say, on certain Halloween nights, if you stand quietly by the gates of Hawthorne Manor, you might still hear the faint laughter of the Midnight Club, now free, echoing in the distance, a reminder of the courage it took to break the curse, and the souls that were finally released from the house's dark grip.